American Counseling Association and Motivo for this partnered event as we observe and support Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Towards the end of the event, we will add a link to an evaluation survey in the chat box. This is the only place the link will be available. Each registrant must be present for the entire event and complete the survey to receive CE credit. You will have until October 31st to complete the evaluation. Today, our panelists will discuss multicultural counseling and allyship. This will include an in-depth conversation on how clinicians can create space for the lived experience of clients and acknowledge the historical oppression and systemic racism that impacts minority populations. I will now turn it over to our facilitator for today.
Thanks so much, Danielle, and thank you so much to ACA and Motivo for having this event. This is a great topic for us to be talking about right now. And so what I'd like to do to start this conversation is have our two wonderful panelists introduce themselves, and then I will go ahead and introduce myself and we'll start our conversation. So Shardé, can you go ahead and start introducing yourself? Tell everybody about who you are, your identity, social location, the work that you do, as well as how you're entering this space. What are your best hopes for today?
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Shardé. Hi. I am in Hampton, Virginia. I have a group practice, the Mahogany Project. And I also do some like consulting, and I just wrote a book called Finding Me. It's a workbook. But I do a lot of work with LGBTQ folk. A lot of my practice is focused on encouraging a space for people to just be themselves. So we take off our shoes, we are here hanging out. That's generally what my focus is just in my therapeutic practice. And my hope for today is just to have a well-rounded conversation around what it means to be an ally, but also what it means to be a therapist in a space that can feel unfamiliar, unknown, and what you do with that kind of energy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Deanna, go ahead.
Sure. My name is Deanna Richards. I guess I'll start a little bit with like what I have. I have a license in mental health counseling from New York, LPC in other states. I am a nationally certified counselor and a certified trauma professional. I have a group practice where we really focus our services on serving people of color, LGBTQIA, and people that identify as non-monogamous or polyamorous. So it's really about creating a really safe space, especially for people with multiple marginalized identities, to be able to be seen, be heard, and get good quality service. And then to sort of move a little bit to who I am and how I occupy that space. I am a Black, Caribbean, American, queer, New Yorker, first gen a person who really comes to this work with all of those identities and holding all of those identities in the room. So I hope that today in our conversation, we'll be able to talk about how clinicians can occupy who we are and work with clients who may be similar or different from us, and what it really means to show up in a space and to be an ally to folks and work from a non-oppressive and anti-racist standpoint. So I'm excited to be here and share space with you all today.
Great, thank you so much, Deanna. Shardé, I'm noticing that I did not follow back up with you for your identities. Do you want to share those? Do you want to help us with the frame of that, or you want to put that into the conversation?
I can put it into the conversation.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Shardé.
Thank you.
So I'm Carla Smith. I am a licensed clinical social worker as well as a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in social justice and infusing social justice in the work that we do, dismantling oppression and using therapy as the space to be able to do that. I am currently in Atlanta. I am originally from New Jersey, and I hold that identity very close to me, even though I've been in Atlanta for about 13 years. I am a professor. I teach marriage and family therapy, and I also am a therapist as well. I too see clients who are experiencing some sort of social oppression based in their marginalized identities. And I do a lot of work around the intersection of safety and courage, and how to, in my role as therapist, provide a space for a safe space for vulnerability and courage, and sharing traumas, and sharing social experiences. I work with individuals and couples mainly who have some marginalized identities at some places. I identify as a cisgender Black woman, and these identities really do shape the work that I do, and so it's going to shape our conversation, as you all see. I want to welcome you all here to this space, and really hope that we can use our time today as a springboard to continue these conversations and this work in your own lives and in your own practice. So let's just jump in. Let's talk about all of these terms that we hear. We hear multiculturalism, we hear culturally sensitive, competent, culturally responsive therapy. What term do the two of you use? Shardé, I'm going to start with you. And why? Why do you use that term?
I use multicultural, but I have to be very honest. I struggle with a lot of these terms because
Sure.
I think that when you're talking to people in general outside of being a therapist, the language means everything. And so, like being with my clients, I like to talk through just what it means to be them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and even I loved when you asked the question about my identities, because I thought even in that moment, like I identify my roles, I identify like what I feel on, like, and I live that, but I don't necessarily like using terms to label those things. So, especially when, I guess if we go with the term multicultural, I just focus on people being able to identify what it feels like to be them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever their ethnicity, whatever their space, their environment, their cultural backgrounds, and we just go from there. So I think I just struggle with the language of it all.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Shardé. Go ahead, Deanna.
Yeah, I really feel what Shardé is saying on that. I was looking at all of those terms and thinking back to my own experience as a student in mental health counseling many moons ago, and the multicultural class and the multicultural text, and what it really meant was going through a chapter to learn about different populations of people. So I also struggle with these terms of multicultural counseling and these larger umbrellas. But one of the terms that I guess resonates a little bit more with how I practice and how I show up in the room and how I do clinical supervision is this idea of responsiveness and cultural responsiveness. And to me, I think, responsiveness is kind of at the heart of good therapy. To me, it's actually at the heart of good human interaction, is the ability to be responsive to the individual in front of you. So that word for me brings up, this idea of constantly being able to engage with who's in front of you. It's dynamic. It requires authentic curiosity. It requires questioning of yourself and how you're engaging so that you can be responsive to the person and their needs. So that's probably one of the ones that feels a little bit closer to home. But I second Shardé in finding a lot of these terms and concepts kind of problematic.
Absolutely. And I think that we're looking at the intersection of academia as well as people's lived experiences.
Right.
And oftentimes academia, with the power and with the privilege that comes with that, is able to set the tone for, for the language that we use. But when we are sitting in front of our clients and we say, I'm a multicultural therapist,
Right.
that means nothing, you know, to them. It's really about how we engage with them, right? They want to feel and know that we are holding space for everything that they are, everything that they have come to be in front of us, and that we're curious about those things. So I appreciate both of those spaces. I think that it's important for everyone to, you know, do the work in identifying what these all mean, but not thinking of them as a specific type of therapy, but a way of being.
Yeah,
Human
I
being.
can even say, you know, as being on both sides of the couch, so to speak,
Right.
that it, you know, that can be a deterrent.
Sure.
You know, if you walk into the room and, you know, the counselor says to me as a client, showing up as I'm showing up, I'm a multicultural therapist. Sometimes that might actually be that they think they know a lot about who I am,
Right.
or how I identify and what that means for me, because they're trained in it or they're competent in multiculturalism. So I think that's really important to you know, kind of hold some of those things, but be really careful about the way that we're speaking with clients and using that knowledge to clients, because it can be you know, it can just have a very opposite effect than you would want with a client.
Right. I think that what both of you are saying, which you know, translates to the next question, is that it's a way of being, that, you know, that this is a process, that we can call it a goal, but it may be a goal that, you know, in our lifetime we don't reach in the same way that we reach goals, right? We can consistently, day in and day out, hold ourselves accountable. So what are those things that you need to hold yourself accountable to be able to situate yourself in a space of respect and inclusion when it comes to our clients' identities and culture? Go ahead, Deanna.
Sure. Yeah, so I love this idea of like, how do I become this, you know, become a good therapist, become more multicultural,
Sure.
become anti-racist. And to me, it's, you know, it's not formulaic. There's no recipe. And it's much more than skill acquisition or this idea of competence. And there are just certain qualities and values that you can't fake. And so for me, when I think about, you know, the idea of being consistently committed to self-interrogation, to coming to spaces with genuine and authentic compassion and curiosity, to being able to enter and engage in hard conversations, those aren't things that you can turn on and off, you know, session by session. Those to me are things that are like life work. So this idea of like, how do I become? It's sort of like, you become by doing, and you become by doing in the spaces with your clients. You become by doing in spaces with your peers. You become by doing in spaces with your family and in your community. So it's much more of a life work. This idea of becoming something.
Sure. Thank you, Deanna. What do you want to add, Shardé?
Listen, you are giving me very much like well put together. I love it. I'm like writing notes. I'm so excited. I think a lot, and I'll professionally and personally, it has always been a being for me. I don't want to be anything different than I am. So I try to make sure, and I love the self-interrogation piece. And I think that the way that I word that is kind of constantly checking myself and doing the work internally, making sure that when I come out of the room, if something challenged me, I need to look into that. I need to process that. So I'm constantly journaling, or I'm talking to my peers. I try to make sure I keep peers around me and friends who can like call me out and are not afraid to be confrontational with me. And I challenge my clients to do the same thing. One of my spiel, because of course, you know, we give our spiel when we get a new client, and part of my spiel is, hey, I can be wrong. Please tell me that I'm wrong. I can be totally off kilter with something I say. Let me know that. I'm okay with that. If I say something that offends you, let me know that. If it's something you need to know, let me know that. And even if you don't feel comfortable in the room because you're new with me, send me like a message. Like let me know in whatever way is comfortable for you, because I'm constantly in a learning space with you. I don't ever want to be in a space where I believe that I know you. That's not safe. And it's not safe for me either. I'm constantly in a space of curiosity, even about me, because with all of the things that I've experienced and that I think I know about me, every day shows me something different about me. Right. So I think it's absolutely what Deanna said about just being curious, but I think it is also giving people the space to let you be in their lives, like, and just let it happen. And in that, it creates this beautiful, like, opportunity for you to ask questions and to build safety and to create like a consciousness in whatever space they allow you to be in with them, if that made sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. Yeah, it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense that now I have to add another question. Okay. So we have to sit in this space of self-evaluation, right? But we went to school for X amount of years. We got these PhDs, we got these full licenses, we got, all this work behind it. So how do we do this at the same time? How do we say, I'm giving respect to the work that I've put into this? However, I'm also needing to interrogate myself. I need to fail at this in order to really know how to do this work. So how do we do this at the same time? Help me.
There's
a lot of humility.
Sorry. That was
Go ahead. This idea of humility. Humility comes into play of, yes, there's training that all of us have, but also, when I think about the training, the training that I had, and it allowed me to do all the things that I'm doing now, so I won't knock it, but also that training is rooted in oppressive systems, so there's recognizing that we are coming from a certain skill set. We've acquired these things through practice and through our academic pursuits, but there's a lot of humility in knowing that we are also still trying to figure out what this means for us in our lives, as being like BIPOC clinicians working with the populations that we're working with, and together there's that process, Shardé, of creating, like, what does it mean for us to be doing this work in this way, in this system,
right,
together. So
I love that. Go ahead,
Shardé.
I'm going to answer all the questions from now on. Just
these questions, though.
I blame you. It's actually what you said that made that question come up. So, that's why you're on the spot.
No, your own fault. It's your own fault, Shardé.
Dang. And then you said in these oppressive systems, like, it just compiles. I'll say this, like, that as soon as you said that, it took me back to being in graduate school and feeling like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? I don't want to ruin these people's lives. Like, I remember that feeling. I remember the fear in it and being scared. And like, after you graduate and you have all these licenses, people think you know what you're doing and you don't. Like, and so I think for me, it's like, I have challenged myself to scale back and not feel like I have to be the expert. Not feel like, because I have an education, that means nothing to my client. That means absolutely nothing.
Sure.
I have to educate myself, and not just the reading of it or like conferences and all of these cool things. I think it comes down to doing the work as a person and then letting the education kind of guide the process, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because I've struggled so much with like, I remember my first client, and that was a total freaking fail. And like, I kept saying to myself, I cannot let this be the experience for another person. But what I did recognize was, we mess up, and that's okay. And I've totally embraced that. And I've allowed myself to be scared and fearful, but also creating a space where people I can say that. I say that to my clients. Listen, today was a challenge for me. Like, I did not know what was about to happen. You were like losing it. That's cool. where do we need to go from here?
No,
I am totally transparent. At this point, I don't have anything to hide. That has been my greatest strategy in embracing my own fear and allowing this to be a learning space for me.
I love that. I hear vulnerability from the two of you. I hear humility and being humble about the fact that there are people at their worst times in their lives,
Yes.
having the strength to sit in front of us and sit with us and to trust us with their wounds. And so we didn't learn how to sit with people specifically unless we did it, unless we were vulnerable enough to say, you know, I'm anxious right now, or I don't know what to say. I'm going to say the wrong word, or, you know, to be transparent about what it is, what it means to me to be in this space at the moment. Right. So that helps me kind of transition to, you know, we're talking about culture. This absolutely is in a time, in a moment where we are also living a daily social experience that is riddled with trauma.
Yes.
It is riddled with seeing it, with witnessing it, with experiencing it, with fear of the unknown and the anxiety of the unknown. So couple that with marginalized identities. As therapists, we got a lot of questions from Black therapists. We got a lot of questions from, you know, therapists of other marginalized identities that have so much going on right now. They are stretched thin with the complexity of this time. So what would you say? What would you say to those therapists? What do you say to yourself as you get ready to do this work? Deanna, you want to start?
I'm like, what I have to remind myself before doing the work is breathe, right? That's actually what, because it's a lot. It's a lot. So yes, that's, you know, I'll come back around to it, but that's one of the things that going into this work, I remind myself to breathe. I remind myself of breath. I remind my clients to breathe and of their breath, because we have to find some starting point to be able to find words to grapple with all of the things that we're experiencing right now. So I'll come back around to it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. The breath is important. You know, I have recognized that meditating before every session makes me able to sit with whatever's going on. And so we got a lot of questions from Black clinicians in particular that were talking about, how do we have conversations where our clients are sometimes saying racist things, or are talking about an experience of that they don't believe is racist, and having a conversation with a Black therapist about that. A lot of it is all in the breath. Go ahead, Shardé. What would you add?
Deanna, I usually await at this point. I'm waiting for the lob so I can feel like I can
I'm just switching it up.
I felt like I was waiting for it. Like, you're amazing. Okay. This whole experience in all transparency has taken me into some very not so okay places emotionally. Because I in my practice, I make myself very vulnerable to the experience. And so even when you create boundaries, because of course, as the more that you practice, you learn how to create boundaries and separate yourself and do all that good stuff. However, there are times where you're like, did that just happen? You know, compounding on top of everything that has happened environmentally, everything that you experience, just as for me as a Black woman, just living my life in general. Right. So having those kinds of challenging conversations in the room with a client has put me in a really awkward, frustrating space sometimes. But what I have reminded myself was, you signed up for everybody and everything. You signed up for vulnerability. You signed up for honesty. You signed up for genuineness. And in that, you cannot control what happens when it happens. Like, you have to live with people in whatever space that is. And you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. However, this is the space that they're in. So I think for me, it is just taking a step back to recognize that this is their life, and they're trusting me with it, even as a Black woman. And that's a big thing, that you have the courage to be honest and express yourself with someone who it could possibly offend. Right. So the deep breath, the deep breath is a big one. And then I have to check myself and just ask my client, like, okay, where do you want this conversation to go? What was your intention? And like exploring this space, what do you need from me? So it doesn't turn into being about me. Right. Because I think those kind of conversations could easily turn into like defensiveness, or I'm trying to protect me or somebody else. And that's not my job. That's not what I'm here for. So I hope that made sense. The long and short of it.
It made sense. If we were in person, I'd be snapping in agreement. Okay. I don't want to mess up the sound today, but you talk, both of you talk so much to the experience of, yes, we have to know who we are. We have to be vulnerable. We have to interrogate ourselves. At the same time, we do have to remember those licenses and the chair that we sit in and the space that we take as therapists, that it can go both ways. Humility goes both ways. And we can be humbled by the weight of a conversation about race in this moment where someone disagrees, or may even make, what we receive as a racist comment. And so to be able to have a conversation about that, and being transparent, but having boundaries around our transparency, and doing our own work. Going to a therapist and being like, you have no idea what I had to, just experience just a couple of days ago. And being able to recognize what's ours, what's our clients, and then where the intersection of that is. That is amazing. And I'm so thankful for the both of you speaking to that.
And now, I'll come back around to this, but it speaks to the question that you asked at the beginning of social location and who we are and how we step into the room. And, I'll be very honest, after the last election, I niched down pretty hard, and the marketing for my group practice changed, and it was very, very clear, who we intended to make safe space for. And so when I get a client who, on appearance or in their identities is not sort of one of the populations that we focus on working with, one of my first questions is, hi, I'm Deanna. I socially locate myself, as many of you heard at the beginning. And then I say, why me? Can we talk about what it will be for you to work with me, for us to do this work together, to create this space together as, a cis, white, straight male? And can you be comfortable? Can you be committed, if we're going to do this work together, to being vulnerable, humble enough for us to be able to have very real conversations when racism is in the room, when sexism is in the room, when homophobia is in the room? What will it be like for you to, or what will it take for you to be able to be honest with me and to receive what I might be able to provide, and the way that I'll be able to come to conversation with you so that we can do this work together?
Right.
And, and that's, I think, where clients have choice, because a client can say, I'm not really ready to do that work, or I'm not really ready to do that work with you. Yep. And that's okay. And it also means for me as a clinician, I can say, I hear you, and here's some referrals.
Yes.
Right? Of people that might be a better fit for you, for where you are at this point in your life. Yes. But if somebody is saying, yeah, it's going to be tough, but let's do this, then that's the responsiveness piece. And that's how we're showing up and being authentic to ourselves, and also working with the client in this way.
But you said that so beautifully. Like, man,
my major was creative writing. I wasn't a psych major. My major was creative writing in undergrad. So I might have an advantage.
Figured it out. We figured it out, Shardé. Okay.
That's beautiful. Because I literally just say I'm not for everybody. I understand if like this doesn't work for you. This is who I am, and I'm ready to get to know you. However, this is me, and I'm not for everyone. So I need to like incorporate some of those words.
Some of the language. Yeah.
I just get straight to it.
Thank you. So help me with that, right? So we're saying that we're not for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between that stance and discrimination?
So the way that I phrase it for me, because I say it across the board, whoever walks in the room, I give them the same spiel.
Sure.
The way that I phrase, or what I mean by that, and the difference between discrimination is, it doesn't matter your race, your ethnicity, your background. I don't care who you are or why you came. In the room, I am still Shardé, 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And if that works for you, I am glad, happily, and privileged to be a part of your experience.
Right.
However, if that doesn't work for you, I am also happy to find you a wonderful individual that works for you. The one, I guess, deal I give them, again, a part of my little spiel is, I'm not offended because this process is not about me. If you come into a space where you are investing your time, money, and energy, and you cannot get everything that you want out of it, I'm not for you. And that's across the board, because that's the way that I've approached finding my own therapist. Yeah. If I come to you and this experience is not what I need, I'm going to find somebody else. So that is really, and it doesn't matter who the person is. Everybody gets the same spiel for me, because you need to know what you're signing up for. I don't want you to be caught off guard. I don't want, I give I don't sugarcoat. I'm straightforward. If I offend you, let me know. That's not my intention, that whole kind of thing. But I let them know who I am in the room from the beginning. So if it doesn't work for you, you have a choice. And I'm not offended. I'm not upset. I will gladly send you to someone who works for you. That's what I'm here for.
Right. I don't know, Deanna, Shardé talking about creative writing on your end. She also has just threw what is it? Out of the park. Hit it out of the park. Hit that out of the park. Thank you. That's so true. I mean, we're not saying because you are a white cis male who, your identities appear to be different than mine, that's why I'm not going to see you.
Right.
And across the board, I want you to know that when you show up, this is how I show up. I'm making sense of, what that means together. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I want you to get the help that you need and that you deserve.
Yes,
absolutely.
Love that. So let's kind of shift, pivot just a little bit. We've talked a little bit around the term allyship. Mm-hmm. That is also a term that is problematic for various reasons, but it is also one that has a connotation for some good things too. Some we are with you, I am with you, I am here in this space to learn and to also act alongside. But there are some problems with the term. So help us understand how if you use the term ally, and what it means to you. Deanna, you wanna start us off?
Okay. I would say, I don't actually actively use the term ally. I feel like my living, breathing self is what I go with.
Right.
But this is something that has come up quite a bit with, I do supervision, and I think there were some questions here, and it's certainly come up with supervisees who are white or colleagues who are white of how can I be a good ally, because I am trying to hold space for Black people, particularly at this time, but for BIPOC community. And so, a couple of things come to mind for me. And one is this idea of like performative allyship, right? It's, it's because something is trending that they don't want to appear not to be, on the side of the folks that they're working with. And so there's a lot of like activity that you might see. So one of the questions I ask of people, or when they're like, well, how do I show that I'm a good ally, is it goes back to that question of being. You just have to do. Right. And again, I don't think that allyship is something that you can turn on and off for sessions just for when you're holding space for your Black clients. But it is about how is it paired with action in these multiple spaces. It's about how are you advocating for your clients that are not your clients, essentially, or how are you advocating for people that you're not necessarily serving, that they're not coming in for that particular service? And how are you advocating, 365 days of the year? I think that's like the bigger piece of this. Right. Is it's not just in these moments that we need people to be visible about how they're showing up and trying to dismantle these oppressive systems, but that this is an ongoing process. And so it has to be their individual process, right? It's not, how can I be an ally right now? Or how can I be an ally in this moment because it's important, because like, yeah, I have this, I have a Black male client now. So how can I be a good ally? This requires that self-interrogation. And without that, I don't think you can be a very good ally, because you haven't done the work. You're not coming to it with intention.
Right. Thank you so much, Deanna. Go ahead, Shardé. What would you add? Hold on. She needs a moment. Shardé needs a moment to all of that Deanna just said.
Jeez. Okay. I'm just going to give a quick example. I'm going to give the example. This is why. So I worked for the city here, one of the cities here. And this was a couple of years back. And I had a Black trans female come into my office. And this was my first experience in working with any transgender person. I had never had the experience. Mm-hmm. So in that experience, I recognized that was a population I felt so connected with, and I felt so empowered by, and I will say, and I'm saying that to say, I think sometimes our experiences can lead us to conclusions that we were not privy to internally before. Mm-hmm. And I think that because I don't use the word allyship at all. But I need to increase my language profile for the record, because I'm just off the cuff a lot of time. But I think in that it showed for me that just because we don't always have the words or the language to acknowledge something that is already internal, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You just have to figure out what it looks like for you. And even with allyship, like Deanna said, it is a way of being, but it's also a way of experiencing, like when you're in something, and I think that speaks to the things that are popular and challenging people to question their ideals about things, where sometimes we just get so focused and routined in things that we don't recognize that we have a problem with something. We don't recognize that we are not an ally, or we are not being open or curious or genuine. We just are on I'm in my routine, I show up, I do my job, I go home. And so in that, it requires some insight and self-awareness to say, where am I? What am I doing? What feels passionate to me? Who do I feel attached to? What identities work for me? What does that mean in the room for me? So I hope that answered your question, but it's an experience for me.
Right, right. You're both speaking to the intimacy that allyship should have, right? So what's problematic with allyship is that there's so much variability in the way people show up as allies that, you know, there's really no way of saying you aren't an ally. Like, I objectively can't look at somebody, I shouldn't look at somebody and say you actually are not an ally because of, you know, how they feel. But an ally can stand next to somebody and not say anything and feel that they are connected to that person. But the person who needs support may not actually feel that connection, because when you look over, they're not actually saying anything. They're not challenging the people in their life to be able to not just stand next to you, but sometimes stand in front of you. Sometimes stand behind you to kind of help when I can't, you know, I can no longer. Black clinicians are saying, I can't right now. This can't be my job. I can't answer the questions. I can't hold you accountable. I can't also help you when this work is when this work is hard. You know, so an ally, I think, you know, as an ally, as a person who intimately connects with people to try to see how I can help, where I can help, where I can be of service, we have to ask questions. It can't be silence. Because I don't know why you're standing there. I don't know. I mean, especially now, if we look at the protests, right? We see a lot of things that are frankly illegal, that are happening, but we see people who stand up as allies who are also doing things, you know, harming property, harming other people, doing things that are not part of what maybe the bulk of the movement is doing, and saying, I'm doing this in connection, in allyship, I'm with you. Well, I don't feel that you're with me, because we're not on one accord, right? So I think that allyship and being with people and that intimate connection takes conversation. It takes humility. It takes everything that we've talked about during this conversation so far, that's awkward, that's hard, that, you know, we don't always want to do. We got a whole pandemic to worry about. You mean I have to also talk? I can't post, you know, on social media, Black Lives Matter. I can't just do that. Now, you know, that's not to say that that's not also doing something. I think that sometimes when we do those things, that it does open up conversations in our direct messages or with our family members when they see that. And so that's not to say that, you know, it's being critical of a person who I'm only witnessing them doing that. But it is about us being able to do that, you know, self-interrogation, and making sure that what we say we're doing is not so that people will just look and just, you know, say that that's what it is, but that it's, you know, in the spirit of the relationship and of the connection.
Not to be controversial or anything like that, but
why not do it?
I just wanted to add something to that, in thinking about, you know, what I think what this time, and I do think, you know, the pandemic, you know, has, everybody's at home stuck doing, you know, God knows what. So there, I think that this actually has opened the platform for more people to be engaged and to be educating themselves. And one of the things that I do feel is useful about this time is that there are more ways for people to understand, research, act upon this idea of allyship and what it means for them, than ever before. I mean, you Google it and there's just a plethora of resources. So one thing is, you know, do the work, right? There are people who are doing this work. There are people who will, you know, the term decolonizing therapy, decolonized practice, this stuff is being done. Go and access it. But, you know, for when I hear, you know, clinical supervisors who are saying, how do I support my clinicians of color? I'm a white clinical supervisor. It's do the work, but it's also hire clinical directors of color. You know, it is about, you know, how are you using your privilege and your power to change these systems. So I think those two really have to come together. It's do that individual work and then acting upon these systems that in many cases, like, you know, many of us are shut out of for various reasons. So there should be some more clinical directors. There should be more supervisors of color. You know, it was very difficult I don't think I had a supervisor of color until many moons after.
Right.
And that shouldn't be the case. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and people need to find out how they want to be doing this work at this point in time. But there's also a lot of ways to do it. And systems, individual work, relationships, talking, and something that Shardé said earlier, and then I'll cut it up, is, you know, there's a peer group that Shardé has that will check Shardé.
Yeah.
And there's a peer group that I have that will check me. But if you look in your peer group and there's nobody to check you, or that you can even have these conversations with, that's something to look at.
Yeah.
And think about, like, why is that?
100%. It's the same call to action as the person who's making the decisions in the agency. It's how do we, you know, act in our own lives and put people around us who represent various identities, various value systems, various thought processes, and how do they challenge us? Yes. Great. So I want to kind of shift the conversation for a few minutes, for our last few minutes, to some of the questions that have come up in the chat. We by no means could not address all of the questions that came up, even the ones that came in before the event, which we really do appreciate those. So some of the things, Deanna, you just spoke to in terms of just some concrete ways to really enact this work and do this work. We're asked there's a question about expanding on the concept of boundaries around vulnerabilities. So, you know, how do we, what are your thoughts as you think about that? We talked about vulnerabilities earlier, and we also talked about needing to have boundaries there. So what do you think? How would you answer that question?
What does that mean around what vulnerabilities?
Are we talking about like therapist self-disclosure, or?
That's how I'm taking it, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to read the room. That's first and foremost. You have to read the room and be very clear about your intention. Be very clear about your intention. Self-disclosure does not work for every client. It is not always appropriate. You really, in my mind, a part of being a therapist is being able to be intrinsically open, but like being present enough to know what's happening, even when it's not being said. Even when the client isn't saying, yeah, or is giving you the words, well, what do you think about this? And this is my experience. And it sometimes is just to say, maybe I need to go in this direction. Maybe we can process through what that means for you, but you have to be able to read the room. If you are so self-involved in like what your next question is going to be, and that you're not reading the room, you can go into something and it can create a problem, and like an unnecessary problem.
Sure. Thank you, Shardé. Anything to add, Deanna?
Yeah, spot on with, like who is this serving by me disclosing this?
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, so my practice does, there are a lot of people who I work with who share the same identities as me. And so when I am thinking about self-disclosure, especially during these times when, my soul is both hurting and on fire, that's something that I share with clients. And I also share with them the ways in which I personally am finding opportunities to move with that. And so for me, I talk about, my own tapping into, ancestral resilience and what it meant for the people who came before me to fight in the ways that they were fighting, facing the oppression that they were facing, and still find time for dance and joy and love and music and community and all the things that really provide the motivation to keep the fight. So those are some of the things that I will self-disclose to clients, because I think those are things that serve a very important purpose. And also, you know, I'm a human. I'm in this as well. So I think that's a very important connecting point.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different questions that we're not going to have time to get to. I do want to leave some time to have the two of you make suggestions for what would you suggest for everyone to do after leaving this conversation. What are some resources? You know, Deanna, you already spoke to, you know, going out and finding, you know, finding the trainings, finding the conversations, finding the resources, the people who do this work. And there are plenty of them. So I would first suggest a basic Google search on, you know, dismantling oppression in therapy, decolonizing therapy. There's actually a specific Instagram page. And to that point, if you all want to also direct people to your social media, that would be great too. So what are the resources and how can people find you?
I'm
Shardé,
still learning my Instagram name. So Shardé, you go first. I have to look it up. I'm no spring chicken. I'm sorry.
Full transparency. She's got to look on Instagram to find out.
One of the best resources is therapy, first and foremost. Do the work. It's unfair for us to ask our clients to do work that we are unwilling to do ourselves. And it's a constant process. So my number one is get into counseling, even if it's for a check-in, and just make sure you're focusing on you. Self-care is another. Making sure you're taking care of you all the time. And then the other is like, because you can, like Deanna said, you can find a million things on Google, and they're offering all of these like presentations and conversations, and but it can't be just a now because this is a hot topic. It has to be a life experience. It has to be a journey you are willing to make a part of your life. And it's a lifestyle, it's a way of living and being, not just a today thing. So if that's something you're interested in, it requires work. It requires peers. It requires people who are willing to explore those topics with you and be confrontational, and you can be in a space you can feel like you can be honest.
Right.
Yes.
I love that.
You can find me on the Mahogany Project, projek.com.
And Shardé, can you also share your book and maybe a link where folks can
a few questions about it too.
Sure. It's Finding Me, the workbook. It's on the mahoganyproject.com, and it's also on Bookshop Finding Me. It's a self-care, self-discovery workbook, and it just takes you through the process of like identifying your traumas, setting goals, identifying who you want to be, writing your story, and not letting other people write it for you.
Great. Some resources, yeah, so Google things, you know, Shauna Marie Brown is somebody who does work on decolonizing therapy, and I know she's going to be running intensive workshops coming this fall. Dr. D. Watts Jones has written a lot about social location and therapist to self in the room, so that's somebody to check out. Layla Said, of course, has a workbook on anti-racism. I am also co-founder with a colleague of mine of On the Mend, and we created these self-paced online modules that are geared towards QPOC folks to go through things like emotional regulation, how to find a therapist. So this is not a replacement for therapy, but if you as a clinician have, you know, clients that you want to give them these extra resources, we're both licensed clinicians, then that is something that's On the Mend, healing.com. And you can find me on Instagram. There's not much on there because I just got on it and I still don't really know how it works. I won't tell a lie, is d.does.therapy, d.does.therapy. And I'm on Motivo as a clinical supervisor. And I care very passionately about supervision because, probably for many of us, it was difficult to find a supervisor. And if we had supervisors who didn't come with the same lens or same values, we oftentimes had to carve out that space for ourselves. So I believe very passionately about that. So you can also hit me up there.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I usually connect with people on Instagram at Dr. Carla Smith. And I am also kind of getting, I know Instagram, love Instagram, but also getting the hang of an almost toddler who's also almost 15. So I do engage with Instagram when I can. And I really am enjoying the conversations that I'm having with people there. Thank you so much to the both of you, Shardé and Deanna, for being a part of this conversation. Y'all, we met on Friday, and the conversation that we had, I wish you all were there too. We have not met, I don't think, before Friday, and so this connection and this conversation is organic, and I appreciate the two of you coming to this space and showing up in the way that you did, and for providing the service that you did to me and to everyone watching.
Thank you. You are
Thank
fantastic.
you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was so good to be here with you. Thank you to Motivo. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, even though I am 2 minutes late. I apologize.
No worries at all. Thank you to our panelists for being transparent, vulnerable, insightful, and thought-provoking. Thank you so much. Awesome job today. Just a reminder, you must complete the evaluation survey to obtain CE credit for this event. Details are located within the chat box. Lastly, if you haven't already, please feel free to register for the upcoming event on self-care for minoritized counselors. A link to register will be provided in the chat box as well. On behalf of the American Counseling Association and Motivo, thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.